Hi, my name is Abrah Arneson, and I'm a clinical herbal therapist in practice in Ottawa, Ontario, and Wakefield, Quebec, where I live. Um, and today we're going to do another video in the series of the Nuance of Herbal Medicine. And what my attempt to do here with this series of videos is kind of look at individual herbs that have similar actions and tease out how these herbs are different from each other, so that as a herbalist, I, as well as hopefully you, can choose the best herb for your people that you're supporting with plant medicine, and also so that you can streamline your apothecary, because I call my apothecary the beast, because I have to feed it every day. And yeah, and it cuts down on some work if you really understand the nuance of herbs, because you'll have fewer herbs in your apothecary. Okay, so let's get started on bitter pungents, one of my favorite classes of herbs. So let me just find my share again. Here it is. Now let's go to the big picture. Start. Oops, play current slide. Okay, there you go. That works. Okay, so the nuance of herbal medicine, bitter pungent herbs. So we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about Acorus, calamus, sweet flag, also called rat root. We're going to talk about Elecampane. These are all bitter pungent herbs. We're going to talk about Angelica, one of my favorite herbs of all times, and rosemary. This is just a small survey of bitter pungents. There's many other ones. A really popular one is Osha, Ligusticum portia, a West Coast mountain herb. I met Osha the first time this summer in the Kootenays. It was a really lovely experience. However, there was a big, bit of a hullabaloo around whether or not we should be harvesting it and how it's harvested. And so if you're interested in using that plant, I strongly recommend you meet the person who's harvesting it and ask them, A, do they have permission to harvest it? What land are they harvesting it from? And how are they harvesting it? Because the guys who showed me the OSHA, like, they had these huge protocols in play for digging up their OSHA. And also a number of folks in the Kootenays, they're growing OSHA. So anyways, it's endangered. There's lots of bitter pungents out there. We don't have to use OSHA. Okay, so my endangered plant spiel. Next. So these are the plants we're going to talk about today. But really what I want you to walk away with is a way of thinking about plants, as opposed to this is this plant, this is this plant, this is this plant, because we're all going to have different relationships with the plants as herbalists. And I want you to be more like engaged in, oh, these are thought processes. This is how to think about plants beyond just saying this plant is this. They're complex living beings, plants. Okay, so let's begin. So some people call these aromatic herbs. I just like the word pungent because it kind of describes what's going on the tongue. Bitter, pungent is a taste. These plants taste bitter, pungent. And the tongue is probably one of the most important organs of intelligence. The tongue has this special intelligence. Um, and it is the great chemist. It tastes plant constituents. It tastes all the medicine. And those tastes tell us a lot about what's going on in the medicine. So before we get going about the plants, I just want to talk a little bit about the tongue and how important this organ, this strange organ that we taste our lovers with before we decide whether we're going to mate with them or not, is really essential to a herbalist. So, why do I love this organ? Well, one thing about it is all of nature has tongues. Even trees have tongues. Um, trees release different like pheromones into the air when they're being eaten, and other trees taste those pheromones, and salicin in particular, and then make themselves bitter. You know, you don't want to eat me. So all over nature, there are tongues tasting life. This is what the tongue does. It tastes life. So just think about snakes tasting the air. Okay, so back to more science. Okay, so the tongue is developed in the fourth week of the embryo. So it's very early on. And it actually comes like, it contains all three different types of tissue in the body. So it has the ectoderm, and that's basically your nervous system, mesoderm, which is all your muscles, as well as your cardiovascular system and your bones and your lymphatic system. And then the endoderm, which is all like your GI tract, your liver, your gallbladder, your vagina. All these organs are in the endoderm. And I kind of think of ectoderm as like the surface. Then there's the mesoderm, which is kind of like the next layer of the body. And then the endoderm is deep inside the body, the stuff that's deep inside the body, well protected by the muscle. Obviously, the ectoderm tissue, the nervous system, is all through the body, but we also use our nervous system to feel the world. And the tongue is very much um, an organ that experiences the world. Okay, so it contains all these different tissues. So one could say that it's in connection with the entire body with that. The other thing that's super interesting about the tongue is its relationship with the thyroid, because the thyroid actually develops out of the tongue in the fifth and sixth week of gestation. And so, what is that relationship between the metabolism and the tongue? I don't know. But for me, one of the ways I think about the tongue is as an immune organ. It is a major immune organ because it tastes everything that's coming into our mouths, and humans love to put things in their mouths. And it the tongue determines whether something is nourishing or poison. This is a really important point for herbal medicine, because basically the medicine and herb, and this is kind of tricky to say, but is the body responds to it like it's poison. And that's a lot of its medicinal responses. So we're going to talk about that more. So just a little bit about the tongue. What I really want to point out here is in the back of the tongue, you're going to see all sorts of lymph nodes. And then there's the tonsils. And you'll see people, like if you look in people's mouths, which I strongly recommend you look in people's mouths, especially if you're giving them herbs, you're going to see like when they don't have tonsils, it's like there's this big gaping hole in the mouth. Excuse me. But you'll also see sometimes swollen lymph nodes on the back of the tongue. And that always suggests to me that there's something going on in the pelvis that, the lymph is working really hard to clear. So take a look at the lymph and what's going on in the lymphatic system within the tongue and in the tonsils. Okay. The bitter taste. So we're talking about bitter, pungent herbs. So let's begin. Oops, that's not what I want. I want to stop share. We're talking about bitter, pungent herbs. So let's kind of break it down. First, we're going to talk about the bitter, and then we're going to talk about the pungent, and then we're going to talk about the bitter, pungent herbs. Okay. So beginning with the bitter taste. So Carrie Bones and Simon Mills are really, really smart herbalists. And I always I go back to them quite a bit and look at what they have to say. And in their latest book, I think it's Functional Herbal Medicine, definitely worthwhile picking up. A little expensive, but it's worth it. It says our internal protection designed to expel these potentially poisonous compounds was tamed and transformed into an invaluable reflex that both stimulates and tonifies our body. And that's what they say about the bitter taste. So I've got like my one of my favorite plants here, belladonna, and then monk's hood, aconite, also called aconite. These plants have a really bitter taste. I have a little poison garden in my medicinal herb garden, and I was out in the garden in this last, I think it was the fall, and we were looking at the plants, me and my apprentices, and one of the herbalists was over kind of like near the poison garden, checking out some of the more the interesting herbs that are there. And she also says to me, "Oh, this plant is so bitter. What is it?" And well, she's nibbling on a aconite leaf, and I'm going, "Oh, remember, herbalist spit. You spit it out." But right away, she had this repulsive response to the taste of this. Like she's just like, "Oh, what is this herb?" And it's instantaneous. Our body knows the taste of poison. And the bitter, many bit poisonous plants have a very bitter taste. So I want you to put that in your thinking cap there. So the bitter taste is the taste of poison. The gag reflex, like sometimes you'll have people with a really sensitive gag reflex and you give them some bitter medicine and the next thing they're like gagging, they can't take it. That's their immune system responding to the taste, saying, "No, I don't want that taste in my body. That taste is poison. Get rid of it." I'm working with a man right now, and he had a very challenging um, childhood, and often he was given food that was not good food, right? Like you know, forced to drink milk that was sour and things like that, right? Very difficult. And so like giving him herbal medicine is almost impossible because to strong tastes, he reacts with just his whole stomach goes into nausea and he feels like he's going to vomit. So it's interesting. We're tuned to expel these plants. I want you to really think about this. Okay, so let's talk about what is tasting the bitter taste. So on every single one of our taste buds, there are 25 cell receptors. So those are little doorways where the cell is activated by the bitter taste. And these are called T2Rs. We have humans 25 cell receptors. Mice have 35 bitter taste cell receptors, which is pretty interesting because they taste everything, right? I think humans are a little more discerning. But these cell receptors sites, these T2Rs, are also found throughout our digestive tract, through our respiratory tract, and throughout our urinary tract. These cell receptors are found also in the endocrine system. The immune cells carry T2R cell receptors, and so does our brain. So our entire body tastes the bitter taste. And like this is one of the challenges with plant medicine is like, can we isolate a single phytoconstituent that has the bitter taste? No, like volatile oils carry a little bit of bitter, alkaloids carry some bitter, they're like and then you have like your simple dandelion carries bitter, and so herbalists call it the bitter principle. So our entire body can respond to the bitter principle in plants. It's not just our tongue. So what happens in our respiratory tract when we taste the bitter taste are the cilia that lines the bronchi in our respiratory tract. And the cilia is what moves the mucosa up and out of the body. It starts beating faster. So it has more movement. It is moving the mucosa up and out of the body. Okay. So, if we accidentally have some poison come into our respiratory tract, the cilia is like it's getting trapped in the mucosa, that sticky mucosa, and then the cilia is pumping it out. Throughout our cardiovascular system, our respiratory system, in our alimentary tract, the digestive tract, that's the esophagus, the stomach, the small and large intestine, they start dilating. Okay, so why would it dilate? Like, if it's poison, you would think it would contract, right? But the dilation slows things down. The dilation in the GI tract gets ready to expel things. It relaxes the GI tract so that, the stomach acids start being secreted to kill whatever poison's coming into the body. The GI, the stomach acids are a big part of our immune system. It deepens the breath, slows the breath, and the thought is that in turn slows the circulation. And if it's slowing the circulation, that means the poison isn't going to be spread through the body quicker. So you have this profound relaxation that comes with taking the bitter taste, and that relaxation is to slow the spread of the poison and support the body in eliminating. It's interesting to me, this because we often talk about the bitter taste in the vagus nerve, and we will get there, but it's a very similar principle here. But it's not just the vagus nerve that's tasting the bitter taste. These cell receptors are throughout our body. Oh, this is crazy interesting. So in our intestines, in the small intestines, where there's T2R receptors, when cells in our small intestine taste the bitter taste, it starts this effluage pump, which pumps toxins out of them. And so as soon as it starts tasting the bitter taste, it starts pumping it out. We don't want that going into general circulation. It pumps the toxin that carries the bitter taste back into the lumen of the alimentary canal, the small intestine, to be eliminated. This is interesting for immunity. For example, a lot of like if you have E. coli or something like that, and it's trying to penetrate the cells, the effluage pump by taking a bitter will pump the toxins from E. coli out. And it activates the pancreas to release insulin. The thyroid has T2R receptors. Remember, the thyroid is germinated from tongue tissue. And yeah, again, it's like we're slowing down the spread of the poison. But it's just interesting, if you're working with someone with hyperthyroid or hypothyroid, pay attention to the bitters you're using. And then what herbalists talk about a lot is how the bitter taste activates the vagus nerve, which stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest aspect of the automatic nervous system, and starts priming all the digestive juices. So it triggers the release of bile, and bile is one of our body's natural biome balancing fluids. It stimulates stomach acids, which also kill unwanted bacteria and viruses and parasites. It stimulates the release of bicarbonate, alkalizing the small intestine so that bacteria or viruses that prefer an alkaline or an acidic environment are killed off in the small intestine. So it's like this bitter taste stimulates a complete immune, non-specific immune response. So if you want to read more about this, this is a great article. There's the link. Okay, so let's talk about energetics, because I think energetics is the foundation of herbal medicine in my experience. And, you can have all sorts of fancy facts about a plant, but if you don't understand this basic energetics, it's kind of, your medicine is not as effective. So it's really important. So the bitter taste stimulates the wind element in the body, and the wind element moves things. The wind element you can think of as movement, okay? And so if we look at what we just talked about is, it stimulates the movement of cilia, it stimulates the movement of the mucosa, it stimulates the release of bile, stomach acids, bicarbonate, it stimulates the dilation of blood vessels, it stimulates a deeper breath. This is all movement. It's really important. The bitter taste creates movement in the body. The bitter taste brings change to the environment. And if you think about your life, like, when you have bitter experiences, it makes you change. Like you're thinking, oh, I don't want to do that anymore. I need a little therapy, or I need to take some St. John's wort, or, creates change. I need to end that relationship, you know bitterness in life creates change, just as bitterness in medicine creates change. And it's change usually for the better. I gotta change this activity. The body, oh, we gotta get some activity going to protect ourselves. So the key, one of the things that I think is really important to know about bitters is generally they're drying. And I always think of how I think now the wind can clearly carries water, moves the clouds around, and then we have rain. Um, but the wind element is also very drying. And I always think, when I lived on the prairie, and there on the prairie, there's these really strong spring winds. And they're very powerful winds, and they just dry up the land. They dry up all the mud, and soon there's just dust everywhere. And so the wind element is drying. It can be cooling or warming, but generally it's considered cool and dry bitters. So if you're using a pure bitter like gentian, you're using that herb carries the energetics of cold dryness. So if you're looking at someone's body and you're seeing that they are cold, their tongue is really pale, they have cold hands and feet, their pulse is deep, the blood's not moving, and you give them and they're dry, you're looking at the tongue and they have dryness, dry cracks on their tongue, and their skin is dry, and yeah, they say they're dry. Often people will go, oh, I'm so dry. You're going to aggravate with the pure bitter. You're going to want to shift things a little bit, either in your formula to counteract that cold dryness, or you're going to want to choose a different herb, because there's lots of herbs to choose from. Okay, there's another way of talking about herbal medicine that we don't talk about a lot, but is the medicine moving up or down in the body, or is it dispersing? Okay, so some plants that are dispersive, like one of my favorites is lobelia, is a dispersive. It moves in all directions of the body. I find echinacea is also a dispersive. Prickly ash is a dispersive plant. Bitters generally move down, and so what they're doing is they're pulling heat out of the top of the body and moving it down. So if someone has a hot migraine headache, you can use bitter herbs to pull the heat down out of the body. Bitters have a downward movement. Okay. And you want to think about, like, well, they want to get that poison out, they bring it down. Okay. And how you can tell whether a plant has an upward, downward, or a dispersive movement is just take a drop of tincture, of a good quality tincture of the plant, and just, close your eyes and feel how that plant medicine moves through your body. And if you can't feel it right away, just keep practicing. Just practice and practice and practice. And then all of a sudden you'll get, oh, wait, yeah, gentian, it's moving down. Right. This is a downward movement medicine. You'll pick it up. But that's important to remember, what direction the plant's moving in the body. Pungent taste. Let's talk about pungent now. Aromatic. Some people call it aromatics. I really like pungent because, it's a very visceral experience for me, this word pungent. And I love words. Okay, so here's the thing. The pungent taste isn't really a taste. What it is, it triggers an inflammatory response in the body. It's the taste of inflammation. It's a burn. It's hot. And the pungent taste is caused by phytoconstituents called volatile oils. And they burn. They're hot. Okay, so let's just talk for a moment about volatile oils. They're the fire element, basically, in the plant. They carry the fire in the plant. And you just think about, what the plant's doing with volatile oils. It's like, oh, come and pollinate me. Or it's like, oh, I'm going to kill you, bug. The volatile oils are fire, passion, defense, all that. So that's all fire. I think of the volatile oils in the morning when they're releasing in the heat, that early heat in the morning in July, and they're releasing their scent. That's like little sparks going off into the air to be carried off by the air. So there's a relationship between fire and air, but we're not going to talk about that right now. But so the volatile oils carry the fire element. Inflammation is a manifestation of the fire element in the body, and it's a burn. The tongue reads the heat in the volatile oils as a burn. And how fire is controlled in the body is with water. So if you take a really hot, I'm a super white person who, sometimes my East Indian friends take me out and make fun of me at dinner where they order something that's super hot, and all of a sudden, like, my nose is running, my eyes are running, I'm salivating, I'm like going for the yogurt like crazy. That's because the heat, the body's reading the volatile oils, the burn in my mouth, as a poison. And that water element just comes in to dilute the poison and carry it out of the body. So again, volatile oils are the body's reading as poison and is responding. Now, obviously, uh, we've evolved with these plants so that depending on the dose and the strength of the plant, the strength of the medicine, the body's going to respond in different, in not as extreme. But if you eat a pepper, this is what's going to happen. And it's a complete immune response. So here's the hot pepper. It's an immune response. So the first thing is the diaphragm starts contracting, and we're going to start hip cupping. And that's like pushing it out. Get it out. The throat swells. That is an inflammatory response. Again, inflammation, the first thing that happens with inflammation is the blood vessels contract or dilate and inflow fluid into the area, into the interstitial fluid, to dilute the poison. The burning sensation in the esophagus. And again, that's like the pain receptor saying something's wrong here, respond, body. Pain demands a response, is asking for a response. Pain is not something to ignore. The thyroid again, this thyroid interacts with these volatile oils and starts causing like excessive movement in the stomach to push that poison out. And that's yeah, the thyroid. They also like really high doses of capsicum can cause nausea and vomiting. Painful bowel movements, again, that's like the body just cramping and saying, we got to get this out. It's like food poisoning. You get terrible stomach cramps with food poisoning. It's the body pushing the poison out. And the other thing too, it really builds up the mucosa. Uh, and I was talking, this herbalist I know in Saskatoon, he was telling me that um, he uses just a very small amount of cayenne in food to heal the mucosa of the stomach. Because what happens when the capsicum interacts, the volatile oils in cayenne interact with the mucosa throughout the body, it stimulates the secretion of the mucosa, and the body doesn't want it. It creates a protective barrier. Boom, I'm making a barrier, and that's what the mucosa is. So there's an enormous immune response to volatile oils. And obviously with cayenne, it's extreme. Like I'm using an extreme example to talk about, like peppermint, chamomile. These plants all carry volatile oils, but these volatile oils are still having a similar kind of very quiet response in the body. So, volatile oils is a big class of phytoconstituents. Often they're talked about as terpenes. The cannabis has really brought this study of terpenes forward. Um, it's often the terpenes in the cannabis plant that's having a profound effect on the body's response to the plant, body mind response to the plant. And there's also like monoterpenes, triterpenes, sesquiterpenes. There's all sorts of terpenes. I don't want to get into the big study of terpenes. I'm just going to call it volatile oils. Volatile oils in plants are not essential oils. Essential oils are an extraction of just the volatile oils from a plant. They are like a very potent extraction, plant extraction. I actually think of them almost like allopathic medicine, like pharmaceuticals. Um, they should not be taken internally because they carry so much fire. And you can just see how taking an essential oil internally, how it's going to create all this immune response in the body. So of course, if you're taking a little bit of oregano essential oil every day, it's going to fight off a cold virus because your body is always in this defense mode, fighting off, thinking that it's being poisoned. And there's long-term consequences to this. So if you want to take a preventative medicine for colds, some thyme and some tea, rosemary and green tea is a great, sage, all our culinary herbs. Make a chai tea, all the culinary herbs have similar actions. So let's just talk about a few things that the volatile oils do. They carminatives. So carminatives increase the peristalsis, as we just spoke about. Obviously, it's not going to go into cramping, but it relaxes the GI tract and increases peristalsis. It's uh, plants high in volatile oils reduce anxiety and depression. Um, they have a significant action on the microbiome. I'll talk about that in a minute. The liver, because the liver is reading volatile oils as poison as well. So the liver speeds up its catabolic and metabolic processes. Volatile oils open up the circulation, spread it out, and often they have a diaphoretic response, so they're pushing toxins out through the skin as well. Um, they dilate the bronchi to ease breathing and ease wheezing. So often I'll use a plant that's high in volatile oils in a formula to be taken as a replacement for an inhaler for asthmatics. And often I'll use a plant like thyme or hyssops. Um, because they're irritants to the lumens in the body, like the respiratory tract, the alimentary tract, the urinary tract, it increases secretions from the goblet cells, which secretes the mucous membrane. And the mucous membrane protects underlying tissues from irritants like volatile oils. And many, many plants that are high in volatile oils have been used as abortifacients as well. And oh, sorry, excuse me. I'm just actually getting over COVID. Um, what who hasn't had COVID this fall? Or I guess we're in January now, so it's winter. But everyone I talk to, oh yeah, I had COVID last week. I had COVID 2 weeks ago. Yeah, everybody has COVID. Anyways, so enough about COVID. Um, what was I saying? Yeah, so but remember that this is all dose dependent, right? So if you're going to use, say, peppermint as an abortifacient, the dose is massive, massive, huge dose, much more than having a cup of tea to after you've had a big meal to help relax your digestive tract. Okay. Or even if you have COVID and you want to, get that fever, keep that fever going, and you're using peppermint as a diaphoretic. Again, you have to. It's abortifacients are often dose dependent. If you want to know more about abortifacients, check out my book called The Vessel. Okay, so the fire element in relation to other elements, and what you want to think about, everything's always happening in relationship. And the basis of herbal medicine in all traditions around the world are the elements: earth, water, fire, air. Some have like ether, some TCM does wood and meadow, but basically this is the groundwork of herbal medicine. And I kind of like am more like taking a Western humoral approach here, okay? Although I'm profoundly influenced by Asian traditions. Um, okay, so the fire element, remember you bite the capsicum, the hot pepper, the cayenne pepper, and all of a sudden all this water is happening in your body. The fire element encourages the wind element, which results in the flow of the water element. The fire element breaks up coldness. The fire element can also be cold. So what is the fire element doing in the body? It can be hot or it can be cold. So if someone's cold, there's usually some stiffness, a sense of stagnation. Often achy is a sign of cold, and that's fire element. If the fire element breaks that up, breaks up cold. You have to be careful if someone has a lot of wind elements. So this would be someone who's like thinks a lot, likes to, has a lot of creativity, is prone to anxiety, doesn't really sleep. You have to be a little careful with the fire element because you can whip them up. Uh, yeah. So so you want to think about how the fire element interacts with wind and water. And it's just out there in nature to see. I have a wood burning stove, and every day I see how the fire element is interacting as I light it. Oh, I forgot to put a log on it. I have to blow on it to get it going again. Oh, the room is getting warmer. It's working with the elements in herbal medicine is very intuitive. Just to have the experience of them in nature, and you'll learn a lot. Okay, in the body, the direction of the pungent taste, which the volatile oils create the pungent taste, is upward. And you just want to think about the plants releasing their volatile oils into the air with the heat of the day, when the heat of the day arrives. So they move upwards. Often volatile oils are used to clarify thinking. They enlighten they open up the senses, so they move upwards, whereas the bitter moves downwards. So we've got these great bitter pungent plants that move both up and down. That's what you've got. They're very dispersive. You could say these plants are dispersive, the bitter, because the bitter taste is moving down and the pungent taste is moving up. So it's dispersing action going on. So plants that are bitter pungent, they support the balance of the microbiome. They thin thick mucus, but they also encourage the release of more mucus, because like healthy, clean mucus, not thick, stuck mucus. They enhance digestion in many ways. They support liver function. They improve mood by easing depression and quieting anxiety. They open up the airways. They cleanse our breath. They cleanse our airways. They support the movement of the cilia out to clean up our airways. So smokers, these are important herbs. They support the resolution of inflammation. If the inflammatory process is stuck, these will get this inflammatory process moving again. They've been used for contraception. They're used to open up circulation. So if someone's really cold, you can use these plants, the bitter pungents, to open up circulation, warm them up, relax them, ease the tension that's contracting the circulation. And you can also use these plants to reduce pain. Wow, these plants do a lot of stuff. But then there's the nuance, the different plants, and what do they do that are classed as bitter pungents. So just a couple of things to remember is that plant medicine happens in relationship to the body mind. So yeah, in plant medicine, we're in relationship like this. It's not like the plant is fixing the body or the mind. It's like the body is responding to the constituents, the phytoconstituents in the plant. And so what kind of response do you want the body to have? That's the question. It's in relationship. So a brief review of the nuance of a few bitter pungent plants. So it's really important to know that not if you gave one person Elecampane and another person Elecampane, depending on the element balance in their bodies, the balance of the water, fire, air, and earth in their bodies, they will have a different response to the plant. Some people are very sensitive to the bitter taste. They'll have a different response than someone who's like, doesn't really taste anything. You got to kind of know who you're giving the plant to, because the plant is responding to the person you're giving it to. Okay. Or the body of the person you're giving it to is responding to the plant. So you have to have a sense of what's going on in the body of the person. Oh yeah. The plant itself, like, where was it growing? When was it harvested? How was it prepared? Was it powdered? All these things. Like if the plant is not harvested in a good way, if the medicine's not made in a good way, if there's not been enough attention to detail with the plant, that's going to affect your medicine. So if you are using medicine, know where it's coming from, know how to make it, know how to tell if it's good or bad, taste your medicine. Your tongue will tell you everything you need to know. Smell your medicine. Look at your medicine, even sometimes just by looking at it, you can say, oh my God, that's terrible medicine. Okay. And also bitter pungents. I work in formulation pretty much always. Rarely will I give someone a simple. And so I use bitter pungent herbs mostly as supportive herbs, not as the primary herb. I always use them as I call them effector herbs. So they demand a response from the body. So this is the body reading that these herbs demand an immune response, and the body responds. And once you have that movement happening in the body, you don't just keep taking that herb. You have to back out of that herb, because the body doesn't want to be continuously poked to respond. Okay. the body knows how to respond. There's one of the great challenges I find as a herbalist working in this time is that people have been trained that once you're on a medication, you're taking it for the rest of your life. And basically, pharmaceutical medicine across the board is addictive. That's a kind of a terrible thing to say, but there's truth in it. Plant medicine is not like that. Plant medicine, you want to create the effect in the body. And once the body has responded in a favorable way and has found balance again and has been awakened, then you pull the medicine out. You don't keep taking bitter pungents every day of your life. You use them when you need them. Okay, so sweet flag. I love this plant, sweet flag. I have a 6 patch of it in the hills by a beaver pond. It likes to grow where there's muskrats. I don't think there's muskrats in there, but I know there's beavers. And you'll find it growing along the edges of like kind of mucky water, like somewhat stagnant with a bit of run into it, right? Because the where I have it growing, the water also runs downhill, but very slowly. The beavers have done a lot of landscaping up there. It's ruled by Mercury. So Mercury is the god of communication. He's the messenger. He delivers the message. So if you want to think about the bitter pungents, how they create all that movement, how they have the body communicating, like how that bitter taste triggers the response to cells throughout the body. The bitter taste has the wind. It's a communicator. The bitter taste is a communicator. It it enhances the communication in the body, the mysterious communication. And I'm not talking about the nervous system or the endocrine system. I'm talking about something that's even more mysterious that we don't know or we haven't pinned down. Maybe some esoteric traditions have a sense of that, or homeopathy has a sense of it. But the bitter taste is a communicator, as is the volatile oils, right? When the volatile oils are released into the air, the plant is communicating with its environment. So these plants are communicators. Calamus in particular is a communicator. It's ruled by Mercury. Plants ruled by Mercury communicate. Oh, here comes my cat. Lucy. Lucy Luna. She's interested in a relationship with Mercury. Okay, so of course comes from the Greek word pupil of the eye. And also in the TCM tradition, a chorus is known to awaken the senses. It wakes up the senses. So it's used when the senses are dull. Again, the senses are about communication with our outer world. Sweet flag as a plant, again, it grows in sort of muddy water. I do know people who have just grown it in a field successfully, though. They water it a lot, but it's definitely not in the edge of a beaver pond. And the flower rises up like this, and that's why it's called sweet flag. One of its names is bitter pepper root. So for me, when I'm learning a plant, I'll go back and look at traditional names for the plant because a lot of plant medicine wasn't recorded, especially, well, I can't really say, but from a European tradition, a lot of the female uses of the plants weren't recorded. But you might find some of that tradition in the names of the plants. So I always go back and very carefully look for old names of a plant because they often tell me something about it. So yeah, so pepper root, it's spicy like pepper. Okay, so yeah, it often grows where there's also wild iris. So you want to be very careful that you're not picking wild iris, which is Iris versicolor. Iris versicolor is also a bitter pungent. It's a really crazy powerful plant. I was out one day and I decided I was going to taste that wild iris root, and I, dug up a little bit, cut off a little bit, washed it off, put it in my mouth, and oh my God, the burn was incredible. Like I had to spit it out. Within 2 seconds, I was spitting it out. It's a very powerful plant. It is interesting that the wild iris has traditionally been used for the thyroid, and that goes back to that bitter, pungent action on the thyroid, stimulating the thyroid in a low thyroid. So you want to make sure that you're not picking wild iris as opposed to a chorus. So that probably means you have to go through 2 seasons before you gather some Acorus to know exactly which one is which. And it's not bad to watch a plant for a couple of seasons, especially in the wild, to see who else is in the environment, and how healthy that population of the plant is. And keep your wild locations of plants secret. Okay, so this plant has a long history of use. The Egyptians were using it in 1300 BC. They were using it mostly as perfume, and it's kind of interesting that they were using it as perfume because it's not, it's not a rose. But I'm almost wondering if they weren't using it, the perfume as a protection, because the volatile oils are very strong. And so wearing the volatile oils to help cleanse the aura, help open the senses, help, have a strong aura, a strong boundary, a strong presence. Ayurvedic doctors use it to sweeten the voice. So we're back to this idea of communication. I have found it an amazing cure for bad breath. So that's a serious biome imbalance if there's bad breath. And I have found, of course, calamus very good for the breath. First Nations carry it in their pocket. So as soon as they start feeling a little bit of a tickle in their throat, they'll start chewing on a piece of a chorus. A chorus is said to govern the heart in traditional Chinese medicine, and the voice comes from the heart. You want your voice to come from your heart. And so this is again like this relationship of the communication. We communicate through our heart. So if you're having a hard time communicating through your heart, a chorus might be a really nice plant to try. And it was traditionally used also as a psychotropic. Again, very high doses, but this goes back to opening up the senses, opening up the voice, opening up the heart. So this is a really interesting plant. Elecampane, so this is more a European plant that has came over with the settlers. One of the herbal books I go back to again and again to look at common names from the European tradition is Maud Greaves' Modern Herbal. It's online. And she always has lots of interesting names for plants. So this one is elf dock, horseheel, and wild sunflower. It's a very tall plant, has big yellow flowers. I kind of think elf dock is interesting in relationship to a chorus being used as a psychotropic. Was this plant at one point used also to support, psychedelic experiences or to journey to different types of realms? Just wondering. Again, this is a plant of Mercury, and Mercury was the psychopomp, so Mercury is able to travel very easily between different realms. That was his job. He helped guide the dead into the underworld, and he could travel from the underworld up to the gods, no problem. So this communication, this sense of traveling, the sense of movement. Yeah, and then dear old Helen of Troy, one of my favorite feminine heroes. Tragic. Anyways, Helen, apparently wherever she wept, and she must have wept a lot of tears, Elecampane sprung up. And I've always wondered about that. And if you have thoughts on that, like why Elecampane would be named after Helena Troy, I welcome them. Please email me. Again, this is a very tall plant, like sunflowers. Culpeper, and this is 1652, so human beings have been using these plants for a long time. He says it grows in waste places. And I always think that plants that grow where the soil is really disturbed are restorative plants. A lot of alternatives that are basically restore the environment of the body to balance, um, grow in waste places. They restore the balance to the body. And so there's something restorative about Elecampane. I remember using it once for a man. I did a house call. I'm not super crazy about doing house calls, but I'll do them if necessary. And I went and saw him, and he had congestive heart failure. He was low on oxygen. And he was just tired of the drugs, and he couldn't really breathe. And he was coughing up this clear sputum with lots of bubbles. And I just thought, I don't know what to do, like, what am I going to do? So I think I gave him some hawthorn and Elecampane for the breath. And it was amazing what Elecampane did for that man. You know, he passed away about 8 months later, but he passed away with comfort. He was able to breathe. It cleared up all that fluid. And it was quite extraordinary what Elecampane did for that man. So Elecampane helps us breathe. It restores balance to the breath. Yeah, so the roots, you're using roots here again. A lot of the bitter pungents are roots. They say don't harvest it after the third year. I have harvested this plant after the third year and found I can use the soil, use the roots. And I also find that I I've grown it in damp places and it's done very well. And I have grown it in dry soils and it's done very well. What Elecampane seems to like is it likes to grow up against something. So I had it growing in the middle of a circle garden and it did not like it there. And then I moved it and put against a wall of the house, and it's just like in heaven. And it's amazing how well it's doing there. So it likes to grow up against something. It likes support. Okay, the ancient Greeks used it to treat poisonous snake bites. So remember how we talked about how the bitter pungent herbs slow the spread of poison in the body? That's what they were doing here. They were slowing the spread of poison. I'm sure that they were not just using Elecampane for the snake bite. I'm sure. But the bitter taste, the bitter pungent taste will slow the spread of poison through the body. It's used in traditional Chinese medicine for easing pain, particularly in the stomach and the respiratory tract. Again, it like opens up the breath. Yeah, the eclectics really liked it for the eclectics were American herbalists, North American herbalists, at the turn of the last century through the 1800s, anyways. Yeah, they used it a lot for weak digestion, chronic lung conditions. Again, it awakens, it enlivens the body. It's mercury. It helps the body communicate. All the systems are communicating in harmony. It's interesting. It was used as that for itch on the skin as a scabwort, and skin conditions are pretty tricky to work with. And I've started using Elecampane I have some people with serious itch conditions. I think they're underlying viral conditions. And it's amazing. It does help. Um, yeah, and it has an affinity for honey. And also in the 1800s, it was taken a lot. London, the air was terrible. It was full of coal soot. People would blow their noses and the mucus would be black. I couldn't imagine. Anyways, they used to use the Elecampane to help keep clearing that soot, that black soot out of their lungs. So this is a clue for people who are in really dusty environments or smokers or Yeah, if you're in an environment where welders, people who are breathing in toxins. Angelica is one of my favorite plants. Angelica, now we've got plants ruled by the sun. So these are, for me, plants that bring out our inner warmth, that help us shine, that help us find our gifts. The sun is our gifts. The sun is our gift for the world. And gifts are meant to give, and they're when we're acting in our gifts, they're boundless. And Angelica is a plant that will help you find your gift. It's a solar plant. Um, it's also a plant associated with the bear. And the bear is the great herbalist. I have a great affinity for bears, and they're also the great dreamers. And pretty soon we're going to be February 2nd or so. And that the Scandinavians say that's the moment where the bear rolls over. And right now, because we're before February 2nd, right around that time, the bear is dreaming of all that has been. And when on February 2nd or so, she rolls over and starts dreaming of the future. So there's a lot of metaphor here with Angelica. It's a bear plant. Again, it's we go back to that sense of it awakens the mind. The solar brings warmth to the mind, warmth to the heart, so that we can see our future and be peaceful with our past. Um, yeah, and then there's that whole plague story about Angelica. You can look it up. And that's how it got its name, Angelica, before it was called bear root. The thing is that bear root is the pagan name for this plant. This plant has a long history in Europe. I write a lot about it in my book, The Weaving. There's a whole chapter on Angelica. So in the garden, I think it's one of the most beautiful plants. Unfortunately, it's a biannual, so it flowers in the second year. And once the plant's flowered, the roots are rotted out. So you have to harvest this plant in the second year, at the end of the first year or at the very beginning of the second year in the fall, in the spring. I recommend that you do both and taste the plant, the roots, because roots are very different in the fall and in the spring. And that goes with all these plants. Do you want the fall plant roots or do you want the spring roots? So the roots have a completely different um, uh, chemical makeup. Like there's a lot more sugars in roots in the fall than in the spring. Plants in the spring tend to be more bitter. Plants in the fall tend to have more sugars in them. Roots have more sugars and higher quantities of volatile oils because they have to protect those roots all winter long. It likes to grow in damp places, again, another like dampness. So that dampness in the body, but I have seen it grow in dry places as well. I do find that, like, if it's growing in damp, like good soil, my friend Steven grows the most amazing Angelica. In this damp, the soil's beautiful. And the roots are enormous. My gardens aren't that old. I'm still building soil and my roots are, yeah, so. Yeah, so this plant is in Chartreuse. It was one of the main plants in Chartreuse, elixir of life. Um, it's nice to have a little Chartreuse party in the winter. A Sami people, I love the Sami people. One of my teachers was a Sami man. And they make flutes. So again, we have this sense of communication. The hollow stem of Angelica makes a beautiful flute. And if you go online on YouTube, you can see people playing Angelica flutes. And they say when the bear wakes up in the spring, the first thing it's been dreaming about doing is playing its flute. So it goes finds an Angelica plant, plays its flute. Yeah, during the burning times, European monks planted angelicas to ward off witches, and women planted angelica so they wouldn't be accused of being a witch. Um, all plants, all parts of the plants are used. I've explored the different parts of the plants, and I just really like the root. It's often used to counteract the nauseating experience of a really powerful bitter like gentian. So remember we were talking about how the bitter taste can create nausea. Out of these plants, like we're kind of going through layers, the most bitter for me, in my experience, is the chorus. The next bitter would be Elecampane. We're getting Angelica has bitter, but we're getting more and more into the pungent taste here now. The eclectic's considered a tonic or stimulating herb. One of the things I think about Angelica is it's a digestive herb, clearly, but it's also a circulatory stimulant. And when there's the heat in the body is not moving to the surface, I really find it's useful for opening up circulation to move the heat to the body. But also when the interior of the body is cold, when someone doesn't know what their gifts are or are not using their gifts, they don't have that inner warmth, that inner strength to um, to move forward in their life with. Angelica is a really nice plant. Traditionally, it's also used to build the aura, and that kind of goes back to the Egyptian use of calamus as a perfume. The last plant we're going to talk about is rosemary, and I never really think of rosemary as a bitter pungent, but it is. And it's also ruled by the sun. Now we're into a plant that's mostly pungent, mostly aromatic, a lot of volatile oils. And one of the things that this plant's name was once compass weed. And the compass is used how we find our direction. And again, this is a plant ruled by the sun. So it's that inner warmth, that solar principle we all carry, that our own inner suns that provide the light for the direction in which we're going to move. So that's an interesting thing. And also it's for memory, rosemary for memory. That's a very popular expression with rosemary. And like we kind of have to know where we've come from to know where we're going. I am a great believer in knowing our history. So this solar plant, rosemary, it shines a light on the past and the future. It's a compass. It's a compass plant. It has a compass. It helps us find our compass. I'd love to see it. I have actually never been to the Mediterranean, which is shameful. Um, or I guess that's just how my life is. It's a Mediterranean plant, and I hear like walking along the shores, it's just you're infused with these like rosemary and lavender and oregano, thyme, all these culinary herbs. Could you imagine? Um, it likes it likes that dry place by the sea, which is a hard place to grow. It's a tough plant. Doesn't really like Canadian climate, at least not where I am. It will grow on the West Coast, on the Pacific, Vancouver Island, Vancouver up the coast there. You can bring it inside and overwinter it. This is such a funny quote from Maud Greaves. Basically, he's talking about she's writing about a sermon that some preacher made at the pulpit about rosemary, about how um, rosemary helps the man rule the house. The head helps the head. Rosemary is a plant that's used to enhance circulation to the head. Rosemary for memory. It's a plant you would use for someone who's having a hard time thinking, clear. It's really, I use it for ADHD, ADD, use it with depression, brain fog, all those. By the way, those volatile oils do cross the blood-brain barrier. So if there is um, some kind of biome imbalance in the brain, and there is bacteria in the brain, these plants like rosemary will help clean that up. And I've seen that more than once with brain fog. Yeah, so anyways, this is kind of like a crazy patriarchal expression. You know, if you grow rosemary, the male will rule the household. But I have also seen if you grow rosemary well, then the woman's ruling the household, these weird ideas. Yeah, so Culpeper used the plant to comfort the heart. So again, that solar energy coming back to the heart. And rosemary was very specifically used by the eclectics as a emanagogue. And the word emanagogue is a bit troublesome for me. And basically, they use the word emanagogue often in replacement of abortifacient. And this plant is known as an abortifacient, as is Angelica is an abortifacient. So, I didn't get like into like the whole like this plant does this because there's these broad kind of like reductionist ideas about how a plant works. Like, oh, look at the bitter principle activates these T2R receptors on cells all over your body, and they evoke this action, and they do. And then the volatile oils, the body does all this response to them, like increase the secretion of mucus to the mucous membrane, relax the digestive system, support digestion, blah, 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 all that. These plants do all that. But then how do you decide which one you're going to choose? And that's where I find I start following breadcrumbs through time to understand these plants from a historical point of view and how people talked about them, because they don't talk about them in the same way. And yeah, so I just hope that this video has helped you kind of think slightly outside of the box about herbal medicine and how to think about your plants and how to choose them for the people you are supporting. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, let me know. If you have an idea about Helen of Troy and why Elecampane is named after Helen of Troy, let me know. And stay tuned for more. Bye.